You know, when we first saw them together, it felt like watching history being rewritten. Two people who seemed ready to take on the entire world, hand in hand, unshakable. But here's the thing about appearances. They're exactly that. Just appearances. And what was happening behind the scenes? Well, that's a completely different story. One that nobody saw coming, even though the cracks were forming long before anyone thought to look closely. So let me be clear right from the start. What I'm about to share with you isn't gossip pulled from thin air. This isn't another round of palace rumors or some tabloid trying to sell papers with half-truths. No, what's unfolding right now goes deeper than heartbreak. We're talking about custody battles, royal intervention, and warnings that could literally shake the monarchy to its core. Word is, Harry dropped a message to King Charles that ties his children's entire future to what the crown does next. And when a prince stops being polite and starts making threats, that's when you know things have gone completely off the rails. Now let's go back to January 30th, 2026. That's when everything exploded into the open. Picture this, a radio show, nothing fancy, just an hour of airtime that somehow managed to change everything. The show was streaming live, branded under all the right logos, looking professional and put together. But the moment Harry started talking, none of that polish mattered. This wasn't some carefully scripted royal comeback. This was raw, unfiltered. A man who sounded like he'd finally hit his breaking point and decided he was done protecting everyone else's feelings. The host tried keeping things light, bringing that familiar, comfortable energy. But Harry wasn't having it. His voice kept cracking in places where you could tell he wasn't even trying to hold it together anymore. He didn't sound like royalty. He sounded like a dad standing on the edge of complete humiliation, finally ready to let the truth spill out, no matter how ugly it got. And then, halfway through, he just stopped, paused, and said something that made headlines detonate across continents. He made it crystal clear that this wasn't about fame anymore, not about streaming deals or celebrity friendships or any of that surface-level noise. This was about dignity, about betrayal, about the kind of truth that destroys lives the second it's spoken out loud. Then came the bombshell nobody expected. Harry looked straight ahead and announced that in February, he'd be heading back to London for a press conference. And at that press conference, he'd formally confirm his intention to divorce Meghan. Just like that. No sugarcoating, no PR spin. Just the cold, hard reality delivered in plain English. Here's what made it even more chilling, though. The podcast had been recorded just days earlier, inside some quiet studio tucked away in West Hollywood. Harry showed up wearing a simple black crew neck, nothing flashy, but viewers caught something immediately. His wedding ring? Gone. That tiny detail screamed louder than any words ever could. From there, Harry started painting a picture of how everything fell apart. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. He claimed Meghan walked out of their Montecito home on January 23rd, not after some long emotional conversation, just suddenly, without warning. According to him, she looked him in the eye and said she was tired of pretending, tired of feeling trapped in a role that didn't fit anymore, tired of watching what she saw as her identity slowly collapsing. But here's where it gets even messier. Harry alleged she admitted to finding someone else. She didn't give him a name, but she described this person as powerful, a Middle Eastern royal figure, wealthy beyond measure, influential in ways Harry apparently couldn't compete with. Someone connected to a future she believed was bigger, grander, and further beyond Harry's reach than anything he could offer. Harry talked about late-night phone calls Meghan would take in private, sometimes at 3 a.m. He mentioned luxury items showing up at the house, Cartier jewelry, Hermes bags, expensive perfumes, things she'd wave off as brand gifts or business perks. And Harry? He wanted to believe her, because believing her was so much easier than admitting what the pattern was really showing him. But the affair itself? That wasn't even the worst part for him. What truly shattered him, what he claimed broke something inside him that couldn't be fixed, was what started happening with the kids. He described hearing his son repeat phrases that sounded exactly like Meghan's criticisms, mocking Harry's lost power, his distance from the monarchy, his diminished status. And the kid was laughing while saying these things, not understanding what the words meant, just absorbing the tone, the vibe, the energy behind them. And in that moment, Harry's voice reportedly dropped to barely a whisper. So yeah, the marriage went cold. But what really, Doctor? Ag them to this private war zone? What secrets from the past could explain how everything unraveled so completely? When Harry's legal team filed those divorce papers in Los Angeles, it sent shockwaves through the entire city. As the podcast kept rolling, Harry's voice carried this quiet kind of devastation, like someone still trying to process how their safe space turned into a combat zone. He painted a picture of a marriage that, behind those closed doors, had become brutal, not with screaming matches in public, but with private words that left invisible scars. According to Harry, Meghan didn't just criticize him, she allegedly made him feel small, even in the new life they'd built together in California. He claimed she mocked the idea that he still had any real influence in America, telling people around her that Hollywood didn't care about traumatized princes. In her world, he said, sympathy didn't sell, scandal did. But what hit him hardest was the power shift happening inside their own home. Harry claimed Meghan constantly compared him to her new partner, measuring wealth and status like it was some kind of competition. He alleged she'd point out glamorous properties in Monaco, Dubai, Paris, using them as proof of what real power looked like. In his version of events, it wasn't just about money, it was about control. Slowly, he said, he went from being her husband to being a symbol, a character in a story she was rewriting, and he wasn't even part of the new draft. Then things shifted from emotional pain to legal paperwork. Harry confirmed that on January 29th, his attorney filed preliminary documents at the Los Angeles Superior Court. This wasn't just about separation. This was the first legal move in a divorce battle that could reshape absolutely everything. Harry said the paperwork laid out his intention to end the marriage, request full custody of both kids, and pursue a division of assets that favored him. Even more shocking were the legal grounds. Harry alleged the filing referenced abandonment, emotional misconduct, and breach of marital trust, all backed by California family code. But nothing was more bone-chilling than what he said came at the very end. Harry alleged that Meghan's final words before leaving weren't about compromise, weren't about co-parenting, or finding middle ground. Instead, he claimed she looked him dead in the eye and said she didn't want custody at all. According to him, she told him plainly that she didn't want the children, didn't want his name, and that he could keep both along with all the therapy bills that would inevitably follow. Meghan didn't appear in the episode, but Harry claimed her legal team reportedly declined to contest custody. That detail alone caused massive speculation, with legal experts calling it highly unusual, almost unprecedented. And as Harry's story spread beyond the podcast and into actual courtrooms, one thing became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a breakup, this was a complete collapse happening in full public view. But what exactly did Meghan's moves reveal about the strategy behind everything falling apart? The world thought this was purely about custody rights. But what Harry revealed made it feel like something far colder, far more calculated. He claimed Meghan had already started systematically dismantling the life they'd built together. Quietly. Efficiently. Why, without any warning? According to him, joint bank accounts were suddenly frozen. Personal mail got redirected. Even key brand rights connected to Archwell were shifted away. In Harry's telling of events, this wasn't emotional devastation. This was an organized exit strategy. And while the public was still processing those claims, a second storyline started moving in the shadows, one that didn't come with press releases or official statements. Aviation logs reportedly placed Meghan on a private jet leaving California on January 23rd, passing through Paris, then heading toward the Gulf region. Just days later, images started appearing in Middle Eastern tabloids showing her entering exclusive venues in Dubai, places typically associated with private royalty circles and elite access. Nothing was officially confirmed, but the message was loud enough. Reports suggested she'd already connected with firms known for handling reputation rebuilds for powerful people. Insiders hinted that Meghan wasn't simply relocating, she was repositioning, a complete reinvention away from Western media drama and toward a world built on discretion, wealth, influence, and proximity to actual royalty. Back in Montecito, Harry's situation appeared to be tightening like a noose. Projects linked to streaming platforms were still surrounded by uncertainty. Archwell was reportedly under audit. Financial pressure around their estate was becoming impossible to ignore. Yet Harry kept insisting that none of this was about money or revenge. He framed it as survival. Then came the moment that changed the entire tone of everything. In the closing minutes of the podcast, Harry delivered a statement that stunned even his most loyal defenders. He suggested that if the Crown refused to acknowledge his right to return home with his children, he might have to place them in neutral care while he fought for their safety. When asked if it was just an emotional outburst, Harry didn't soften his words. He simply stated he wasn't bluffing. Legal experts say that one statement alone could force urgent conversations behind palace doors. Emergency custody measures, jurisdiction fights, quiet diplomacy. Negotiations that would never see daylight. And with Dubai now part of the equation, this is no longer a simple divorce battle. It's a global power struggle unfolding in real time. The countdown to February has begun. Mediation sessions and custody hearings are quietly being scheduled behind closed doors. But what led to this explosive moment where hidden conflicts are about to burst into the royal spotlight? As February arrives, the countdown isn't just marking days anymore. It's marking decisions. Mandatory mediation is looming on the horizon. Custody hearings are being prepared in private. And London is bracing itself for a press conference that could become one of the most defining royal moments in recent history. Insiders claim Harry is expected to formally confirm the divorce there, while also laying out exactly what his future looks like after everything that's happened. But this isn't the kind of separation that ends with a polite statement and everyone moving on. This is a legal and cultural battlefield stretching across California, the United Kingdom, and possibly even further. Behind the scenes, legal experts on both sides of the Atlantic are reportedly treating this case like a high-stakes puzzle, one involving dual citizenship, international relocation laws, and the kind of jurisdictional conflict that can turn family court into an all-out war zone. Even frozen nonprofit assets have been pulled into the mess, creating a storm where every document, every interview, every public comment carries serious weight. And that weight grew even heavier after the dust from Harry's podcast revelations started to settle. While the public focused on the emotional fallout, lawyers began studying the structure. Sources suggest Harry's legal team has been leaning heavily on key sections of California family code. Rules that allow judges to examine emotional harm, abandonment, and which parent has provided the most stable daily care. In other words, this isn't just about love falling apart. It's about who can prove consistency. According to leaked excerpts from the filing, Harry is reportedly presenting himself as the only steady parental figure in recent months. The claims are said to be backed by school records, caregiver testimony, and documented communication gaps that allegedly point to Meghan being absent more than anyone expected. The message behind the argument is simple but sharp. Stability already exists, and it exists with him. That's where the case becomes truly explosive, because custody here isn't just a private family matter. It's the trigger that could reshape everything. For Harry, this may be a fight for redemption, identity, and a return to something familiar, even if it means stepping back into Britain with a reduced royal role focused on humanitarian work and family. For Meghan, the whispers suggest something entirely different. Reinvention. Influence. And the possibility of building power far away from royal tradition on foreign soil. What was once sold as a modern love story has now become a reckoning between two completely different visions of power. One rooted in legacy, the other rooted in ambition. And as the world watches February unfold, it's becoming painfully clear that this is not just the end of a marriage, it's the end of an entire era. Meghan's choice to step back from shared custody has stunned even the most experienced legal experts. But what drove her to this unprecedented decision? And could her past experiences reveal the full story behind it? Meghan's reported decision to walk away from shared custody has sent shockwaves through California's family law circles. Not because celebrity breakups are rare, they're not, but because this particular move is almost unheard of. For many legal experts, the real surprise isn't what she asked for, it's what she didn't ask for. No shared schedule, no visitation request, no visible effort to stay formally connected. To some observers, it reads like emotional distance. To others, it feels calculated, an attempt to free herself from long-term ties that could slow down bigger plans beyond the United States. While Meghan's silence grows louder by the day, Harry has chosen a completely different path. He's reportedly framed the custody fight as protection, not punishment. In a recent podcast appearance, he spoke with unsettling honesty about the changes he claims to have noticed in both kids. He described moments of withdrawal, confusion, and strange phrases that sounded rehearsed rather than natural. The most painful part, he hinted, came during bedtime conversations when the children reportedly asked why their father no longer had a kingdom, or when the real prince would return. To Harry, these weren't innocent questions. They were signs that his children's identity was being slowly rewritten, reshaped by forces he couldn't control. Behind closed doors, Buckingham Palace is said to be watching with intense caution. There may be no public statement yet, but insiders suggest King Charles is deeply uneasy, not simply about family conflict, but about what Meghan's next steps could represent on a global stage. Reports claim her recent movement toward the Gulf region is being viewed as more than personal reinvention. In royal circles, cultural influence and high-level branding outside traditional Western structures can carry diplomatic weight, even when it looks like lifestyle PR. Prince William, according to sources, is reportedly sympathetic toward the children, yet unwilling to make any bold move until the legal situation becomes clearer. Any attempt to bring Harry and the children back into the UK too soon could trigger international complications, especially under international custody conventions. With dual citizenship and multiple jurisdictions involved, even one wrong step could explode into a global legal nightmare. Meanwhile, Meghan's repositioning appears swift and disciplined. Within days of her reported arrival abroad, glowing editorials began surfacing in international outlets. The story being pushed is consistent: a woman reclaiming autonomy, escaping institutional control, stepping into a new chapter of global relevance. Yet one detail keeps raising eyebrows. These narratives reportedly avoid mentioning Harry, the children, or Archwell entirely. And in a saga like this, omission can be more powerful than any headline. Meghan's public image is shifting. Louder scandals are being replaced by a colder, more calculated approach. But what sparked this transformation? Did past royal conflicts shape her new strategy? Or is there a deeper plan behind her calm exterior? According to branding analysts, something has clearly changed in Meghan's public approach, and it's not subtle. The loud royal fallout that once shaped her image is slowly being replaced by something colder, calmer, and far more calculated. Instead of chasing attention, she now appears to be building a new identity around discretion, elite philanthropy, and quiet influence. Spaces where the rules are different, where visibility is controlled, and where accountability is easier to blur. In these circles, Western tabloids hold little power, but proximity to wealthy decision-makers holds everything. Yet behind this polished shift, the financial ground under the Sussex brand is reportedly cracking. Archwell, once presented as the moral heartbeat of their public mission, is now facing serious pressure. Regulatory reviews have allegedly triggered state and federal attention, with reports claiming key accounts have been frozen, donations delayed, and grant partnerships paused. Documents said to be circulating internally describe inconsistent disclosures, unexplained transfers, and luxury expenses filed under vague operational descriptions. What once looked like a charitable empire now risks being viewed as a tangled mess of blurred lines. And then there's Montecito, the California estate, purchased during their most hopeful period. has reportedly become less of a sanctuary and more of a looming financial weight. With a large variable-rate mortgage, missed payments, and growing tax liens, the home now symbolizes overreach rather than freedom. Sources suggest Harry has asked the court for permission to sell the property before foreclosure becomes unavoidable. The goal is said to be simple: use any remaining equity to secure a smaller, quieter home in the UK, one built for privacy, stability, and a life far away from constant public drama. But the most surprising twist isn't about money, it's about public opinion. Early polling and online discussion, especially in parenting spaces and expat communities, suggest a slow but noticeable shift in sympathy toward Harry. Where he was once framed as a disgraced royal who walked away from duty, more people are beginning to see him as something else entirely. A father trapped inside a collapsing marriage, trying to protect his children while everything around him turns into legal warfare. Some observers have even raised concerns about Meghan's apparent detachment from day-to-day parenting, regardless of how they feel about her ambitions. Still, not everyone is convinced. To critics, this isn't a tragedy, it's a strategy. A rebrand on one side, a legal fight on the other, and two narratives racing toward the same finish line. And somewhere in the middle, the question is no longer about titles or interviews. It's about who controls the story next. Harry's revelation shook the world and turned private struggles into public controversy. But what really motivated him to speak out? Was it personal healing, legal strategy, or something even deeper behind the headlines? When the podcast dropped, it didn't feel like just another headline. It felt like a warning shot. Overnight, Harry's public disclosures stopped being treated as personal pain and started being viewed as a legal tool. Critics quickly accused him of turning trauma into leverage, while others questioned the timing, insisting the release was no accident. To many observers, the podcast became something far more strategic. Evidence, influence, and a carefully shaped narrative all rolled into one. And with that, the Sussex experiment, once sold as a modern royal partnership, appeared to reach its final collapse. The promise had sounded powerful at the beginning. Tradition blended with progress, privacy balanced with influence, a new path carved without destroying the old one. But the weight of conflicting ambitions has cracked the foundation. What now emerges is not a united front, but two separate directions that no longer meet. Harry seems to be searching for grounding, a sense of return. Meghan appears focused on elevation and escape. Their futures are no longer parallel, and the gap between them is widening with every legal step. Behind the scenes, the stakes are rising fast. Court dates are approaching. A mandatory mediation session hangs in the air like a deadline neither side can ignore. Preliminary custody hearings are scheduled, and financial arbitration is quietly lining up behind them. Each legal stage narrows the space for reconciliation, and every new filing makes the divide harder to reverse. What once looked like tension now looks like a full separation of worlds. In the middle of it all are two children, largely unseen by the world, yet profoundly affected by CES far beyond their years. Every decision made by adults around them, decisions made in rooms they'll never enter during conversations they'll never overhear, has the power to shape their childhood and their understanding of family. For Harry, protecting their identity, emotional stability, and sense of normalcy has reportedly become his defining mission, a responsibility he takes with fierce determination. For Meghan, the children increasingly seem entwined in a chapter she may be choosing to close, at least for now. Whether that decision is driven by emotion, strategy, or circumstance remains uncertain, but the resulting silence has only fueled speculation, intensifying public scrutiny and curiosity. As February unfolds, all eyes are turning sharply toward London, where Harry is expected to face the press and formally outline his next steps. Leaked drafts suggest his message will focus less on titles, privilege, or status, and more on truth, accountability, and fatherhood. Meghan, meanwhile, remains largely silent from her residence abroad, letting carefully curated narratives speak on her behalf. The contrast is striking, almost deliberate, one voice stepping forward with clarity, the other remaining just out of reach, leaving the world to interpret every pause, every absence. This is no longer simply a story about love lost. It's a story about power. Who holds it, who gives it up, and who reshapes it to survive. It's about the cost of reinvention and whether escaping one system simply means entering another. More than a royal divorce, this moment exposes something deeper, how legacy fractures when ambition outpaces alignment, and how the future can pull two people so far apart that the past becomes unrecognizable. The battle over the Sussex's future is unfolding behind closed doors, far from public eyes. But what hidden strategies and secrets are shaping the outcome? And who really holds the power to decide the story the world will remember? This will not be settled with interviews, glossy documentaries, or carefully worded palace statements. The real ending is being shaped in courtrooms, behind guarded royal doors, and across borders where private lives collide with public power. And when the final ruling arrives, it will not only decide custody arrangements or financial terms, it will decide which version of this story becomes the one the world remembers. For years, these two were sold as the modern answer to an ancient institution. They were bold, different, seemingly unstoppable. Their marriage felt like a turning point, a new royal era built on reinvention, independence, and emotional honesty. Yet now, what once looked like a fresh beginning has become a global reckoning, one that exposes how fragile modern royalty truly is when love becomes leverage and legacy becomes currency. What makes this unraveling so haunting is that both sides may genuinely believe they're fighting for freedom. But freedom once chosen often demands a price neither side fully expects. The dream of building a new life outside royal tradition came with distance, pressure, and an entirely different kind of control. And now, as silence grows louder than statements, the consequences are no longer theoretical. They're arriving in real time. At the heart of everything are two children who never asked to become symbols in a battle of identity, loyalty, and ambition. Their future is no longer just a family matter. It's become a question of jurisdiction, public perception, and competing visions of what a royal life should mean in the modern world. As legal discussions tighten and court dates draw nearer, the focus shifts from romance to responsibility, from public image to private damage. Harry's fight, as it appears now, seems rooted in return. Not necessarily to the palace itself, but to something he believes he lost along the way: stability, identity, a life centered on fatherhood rather than performance. His struggle feels like a man trying to reclaim his own name from the noise that's followed him since childhood. In contrast, Meghan's path appears focused on ascension, not in the loud, obvious way critics often claim, but in a quieter, more strategic direction toward new spheres where influence is controlled, titles can be flexible, and accountability works by different rules. This is why the stakes feel so enormous. This is no longer a debate about who's right or wrong. It's about choices and the consequences that follow when two people stop building a future together and start negotiating power apart. One side seems to be pulling toward a structured legacy. The other seems determined to outgrow old systems entirely. And when two visions of power can't coexist, the marriage becomes less of a bond and more of a battlefield. The world first watched them walk away in 2020. By 2021, the distance between them and the monarchy had turned into something permanent. Now that distance may be measured not in miles, but in legal terms. The next stage of this story won't be delivered by headlines alone. It will unfold in courtrooms, in private meetings, and in the quiet spaces where lives are permanently changed by public decisions. Whether the end brings redemption, reinvention, or permanent division remains uncertain. But one truth is impossible to ignore: history is no longer repeat.